Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. Panjshir, the last remaining holdout province in Afghanistan, has also fallen. Today, the Taliban, they were ably assisted by the Pakistan Army, the Air Force and the ISI. They've taken over the mountains and valleys of this very same province where the late Ahmad Shah Massoud led a massive resistance against the Soviets, and his son Ahmad Massoud, along with the likes of Amrullah Saleh, were trying to do the same to the Taliban. But let's be absolutely very clear how this has come about. This has come with the active support of the Pakistani establishment. Remember, the ISI chief was in Kabul just a couple of days ago, and then right after that, the fall of Panjshir happens. What will form as a government in Kabul over the next few days will merely be a proxy regime for the generals in Rawalpindi. The question, though, is why is the world still not willing to call out Pakistan's bluff?
Two decades ago, the brave fighters of Panjshir won a 5-year war in resisting the Taliban. This time, the resistance folded up in just 3 weeks. The difference? This time the Taliban had the support of one of the most militarized nations in the region, Pakistan. Emboldened by Pakistan's direct support, with Pakistani Air Force bombing the valley and its special forces fighting alongside the Taliban fighters, Taliban claims it has completely captured the landlocked Panjshir Valley. The biggest proof is the presence of this man, Faiz Hamid, the chief of Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, who was spotted in Kabul on Saturday. Barely 48 hours later, the Taliban had prevailed. For weeks, Ahmad Massoud and Amrullah Saleh had both appealed for international support for the national resistance movement. But with major powers like US, Russia, China, Germany and Britain and the United Nations willing to give Taliban a chance if it mends its ways, Panjshir was always fighting a lost battle this time. While Russia and China abstained in the vote, a United Nations Security Council resolution sponsored by the US, UK and France had sent a clear message that the international community had no problem with a Taliban-led inclusive government if it upheld human rights concerns and took care of women, children and minorities. And as a result, the world failed Afghanistan for the second time in less than a month. With Santosh Chaubey, Vaibhav Verma, CNN News 18.
All right, this fall of Panjshir, which did not fall to the Soviets for a good 5 long years, this has now fallen to the Taliban. And let's be very clear, the Pakistani prints are all over the fall of Panjshir. On the 4th of September, that was Saturday, the ISI chief, Faiz Hamid, is in fact in Kabul. He's having tea with the Taliban leadership. On the 4th of September, the same day, there are major supplies and roads that are blocked by the Taliban outside of Kabul. The next day, which is Sunday, the 5th of September, special forces are airdropped to take on the resistance under Amrullah Saleh and Ahmad Massoud. The same day, the 5th of September, Sunday, the Pakistani Air Force drops bombs via drones. Taliban forces enter the capital of the Panjshir Valley. The next day, which is today, the Taliban says the last holdout province is captured. Remember, all of this has happened with the active support of the Pakistani establishment. Let me now bring in our guests who are joining us on the talking point this evening. Mona Alam is a senior journalist and political analyst, Tuhin Sinha, spokesperson of the BJP. Retired Major General S.P. Astana is a global strategic and defense analyst. We're also joined by Professor Christine Fair, South Asia expert from the Georgetown University. Let me start with you, Professor Christine Fair, because you're just coming off an interview with a global network, and your video has gone viral there, where you were trying to make a point about how Panjshir could not have fallen without active Pakistani support. Can you elaborate why the international community and everybody is so squeamish about accepting this reality that there is active Pakistani support, not least what we've seen in the last few days? The ISI chief is there on Saturday, and on Monday, Panjshir falls.
So in fairness, the so-called journalist in question was asking me, what did I make of the ISI chief's arrival? And at that point, Panjshir operations had not yet begun on Panjshir. So you can see, I mean, the clip, it's just difficult for me to watch because every question that she asked was leading, and the premise of each question was framed to within the context of Pakistan's preferred talking points. And apparently a BBC spokesperson responded saying that news readers are supposed to be combative. But when you actually go back and you look at Pakistani officials on the same platform, they are never interrupted. They are never interrogated. Their integrity is never impugned, even when they are, quite frankly, espousing rank fictions. So I had over the years, I'd done her show a couple of times. She's not Lise Doucette, right? Lise Doucette's out in the field learning stuff. As far as I can tell, she is just sort of a vapid newsreader with a good haircut who isn't terribly informed. But given how long she's been doing this job and given how important it is to her country, I think she should have been more informed. So I can't really explain what her motivations were. I'm not in her head. But what I can say is that it's not the first time this has happened. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing Bloomberg Asia, and the question arose whether or not the Taliban needed international recognition. I said, well, I'm not sure what you mean, but if you mean Western recognition, it doesn't need it because it's got what it needs from Russia, but more importantly, China, as well as Pakistan and to some extent Iran. And I went on to explain the very long-standing ties between the Chinese and the Taliban that predate 9/11. And just as you saw Ms. Thomas do on the BBC, there were three hosts. There were three male hosts and me, and they were actually all in studio. And they continued to say, well, that's of course your opinion. And I said, no, sir, it's an actual fact. I have news articles attesting to this. This isn't an opinion, it's a fact.
Okay.
So whenever the issue arose of Chinese role, whether it was noting that they were the single largest investor in Afghanistan and thus having stability. And of course, China has a different kind of stability, right? China doesn't care if Afghans are happy. China doesn't care if the Taliban murder people. What it wants from the Taliban is security for its projects so that it can get resources out of ground into market. And to anyone who's been watching, the Taliban have been consistently signaling their cooperation in this. So I think if you look at a lot of mainstream media, including those in India, Al Jazeera is another, Fox News in the United States, MSNBC is another. The decline of quality news is rampant. And it's rampant because these networks have commercial interests.
Sure.
But I guess, obviously, in the case of Bloomberg Asia, they have to keep China taking a look. And I think the BBC is actually an interesting predicament, right? Because it's a publicly owned organization.
Yeah.
And we know that the Britons have tolerated all sorts of outrages from various quarters of their Pakistani Muslim community, whether it was radical terrorism that was brewing. Some of the mosques brought Masood Azhar to the United Kingdom to do fundraising because they are such an important swing voter electorate. No one wants to irritate the sentiments of the Pakistani Britons. And you'll even see them having to dance around this in their various DFID-led counterterrorism extrism.
So if I may just
I think it was that was
scope.
what was motivating the BBC to silence me.
If I can just broaden the scope, it's not just about the global media. I think there are enough people in the security establishment, whether it's in Washington or in London, who also buy this whole theory that somehow the Pakistanis are victims, or they're not willing to call out this whole deep linkages between the Pakistani state and what's going on in Taliban controlled Afghanistan right now. But Mona Alam, let me ask you this, and very objectively, is it merely a coincidence to you that the ISI chief, Hamid Faiz, was in Kabul on Saturday, and then Saturday night, Sunday morning, this massive offensive begins in Panjshir, and by Monday, the Taliban say that they've conquered Panjshir? You think that's just a mere coincidence?
Look, yeah, Zaka, I think, yes, the timings are coinciding. But if you go by this logic, then I mean, nobody from Pakistan was even remotely near the Taliban or their leadership on the 15th of August when they took over most of Afghanistan and most of the provinces. Panjshir was the only one left out, and today, reportedly, it has fallen, though there are reports, some contrary reports as well from Ahmad Shah Massoud, that they're still fighting on. But let's see. I mean, I do not know if it has really fallen or not. These are reports. But if you just go by the timing, this, I think, is the only factor which is kind of validating these claims or allegations against Pakistan.
But you don't say anything to the ground reports that are coming from there which suggests that there were air assets, Pakistani air assets seen, that Mr. Dashti, who is the spokesperson of the resistance, he was killed by a Pakistani drone. You don't say anything to these reports that are coming from the ground.
Look, Zaka, actually, you know, the Taliban are also they're also in custody of drones. They could have used drones as well. And I think I would also quote a very credible Indian journalist, Mohammad Zubair, who's been saying that the video footages that the Indian media, by and large, is claiming is from Panjshir and of, Pakistani aircraft assisting the Taliban takeover Panjshir. Those are actually video footages of a video game.
No, I just want to underline, since you brought this up, CNN News 18 did not run those videos. We verified it, and one of our news editors found that it was part of a video game. That was not what I was referring to. I was referring to what people on the ground are saying. But Tuin Sinha, you want to respond to that? Frankly, I mean, this may be a very well-known fact, and I understand Mona Alam's compulsions. You may not want to admit this or be seen as admitting this on an Indian television channel. But those linkages are there. Tomorrow or day after or later this week, whichever government is going to get formed in Kabul is going to have people handpicked by the Pakistani establishment, including Sirajuddin Haqqani, who we are given to understand is likely to be the new interior minister. The question is, what is the world going to do about it? What are we doing about it? I mean, it's okay if, for the US and the UK, they're not in this part of the woods. There are direct security implications for us, and we don't seem to have much leverage in this new government that's shaping in Kabul.
Zaka, since I am under no obligation to not mince words, let me just say that Pakistan today stands as a sore embarrassment to the civilized world. And after the open support they have provided to both the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in brutalizing the Panjshir resistance warriors, the inherent duplicity, perfidy, and destructive nature once again stands reiterated in front of the world. And why are we surprised? After the 1971 war, they have followed terrorism as an instrument of state policy. In India, they have activated sleeper cells, and from the early 90s onwards, they openly supported the Taliban. So today, it's a realization of their 3 decades old dream. But today, accountability, when history fixes accountability, the role of that US regime, which had outsourced the task of combating Taliban to Pakistan, knowing fully Pakistan's true intentions, will also come under the scanner. Yes, it's a particularly precarious situation, so, I can understand the compulsions of a lot of countries in not openly commenting on the developments. But India, frankly, knowing Pakistan's perfidious nature for the last 4 years after the Pathankot incidents, this is precisely the reason why we have maintained an arm's length distance from Pakistan. And this is the reason why, we cannot ever trust a country like Pakistan. And also, let me add over here that Pakistan does not seem to realize that by breeding snakes in their backyard, they can't be safe. The next target of Taliban, mind you, is going to be Pakistan, and they will be swallowed by Taliban next, so they better be prepared for that.
No, so I want to ask Praveen Swami 2 things. One, do you believe that the same Panjshir army, the same Panjshir resistance front, as it were, whose fathers and grandfathers held the Soviets back, in fact pushed them back for 5 years, could have been defeated without the support, active support of the Pakistani state and its various organs, number one. And number two, the larger question which I asked Christine Fair, it's not just a media question, it's a question of why the global security establishment is giving such a long rope to Pakistan. I mean, this is the worst kept secret in town, that the Pakistani state, the establishment there, is calling the shots. They are the ones who are controlling the Taliban. And yet, everybody from folks in Washington to London are happy to just look the other way, pretend like doesn't happen.
I do have
Praveen, sorry,
an
that question was
answer.
to Praveen.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
To the first question, Zaka, I'm not sure actually that the Panjshir resistance has been subdued. I think there's some myths surrounding what's been happening over there. If you go back to the Soviet era, the Soviets attacked the Panjshir Valley 9 times. On none of those occasions did Panjshir frontally confront or destroy the Soviet armed forces. In fact, they, in military terms, lost each time. But then they retreated into the 80 valleys, 200 odd villages at high altitude on each occasion. It became too costly for the Soviets to sustain their forces for any length of time, and the insurgents came back. And I suspect that's exactly what's going to go on there for a little while. The Taliban are insurgents too. They're not in a position to maintain, tens of thousands of forces in Panjshir indefinitely. So we're going to see this story unfolding, and probably we are going to see it in other parts of Afghanistan also slowly unfold.
Okay.
As to the second question you asked about United States intentions, I mean, we know the Americans know this, right? We know because American officials have said this in testimony. We know from declassified documents that they're perfectly aware what's going on. The United States believes, rightly or wrongly, that Pakistan is more important for its strategic interests than Afghanistan, that Pakistan is too important to be surrendered to Chinese influence, that it has a role in the Middle East, and they're happy to subcontract this problem to the Pakistanis. Now, is that short-sighted? Yes. Does that have serious regional security consequences? Yes. Is the United States likely to be bothered about them? Probably not, because it's countries in the immediate neighborhood,
That should be right.
including India, that will have to live with them. So I think there's a certain degree of cynicism to this. I don't think it's ignorance or misunderstanding at all.
Okay, I want to ask Major General Astana, from the reams of footage that we've seen of the weapons that have been left behind by the U.S. forces, whether it is sophisticated choppers like the Black Hawks, or whether it is even drones, all of which we're given to understand, at least from ground reports, have been deployed in Panjshir. Do you believe the Taliban has the capability to run these machines without some form of support from across the Durand Line, from across by the Pakistani establishment and its various military wings?
There is no doubt that all this can be done only with the support of Pakistan. There is no doubt that the force ratio improves or goes in favor of Taliban only with support of Pakistan. Pakistan has been supporting them. It's a known fact. There are various reasons. You have been asking various other panelists as to why the whole world is quiet. There are two reasons for it. Number one, as of now, everybody is stuck because some of their people are in Afghanistan, and the only way to get them out is via Pakistan. And therefore, you will find everybody negotiating with Pakistan.
Okay.
The second major reason is that Pakistan is a nuclear state, and it is also a rogue state. And a rogue state, if it passes a dirty bomb to Al-Qaeda, the potential of the next 9/11 can be much heavier. So therefore, a number of strategists of United States, whom I have been speaking to, they have been saying that if we push Pakistan beyond a point, there can be certain dangerous implications.
But how exaggerated is that view? I mean, how realistic is the chance that the Pakistani state or elements therein could potentially pass on nuclear know-how to one of these terrorist groups in a way that it threatens the safety of any of the countries here in the region, or worse still, the US or UK or other Western countries?
See, as far as the US assessment is concerned, they are very clear. Their assessment was that most of these terrorist groups will become strong enough to strike the mainland again in a time frame of 2 years. But my assessment is 2 years is too long a time. They will be stronger much earlier. Second is nuclear arsenal certainly will not get passed on to these terrorists. That chances are remote, and it cannot be operated also so easily.
Yeah.
But a dirty bomb is a possibility. A dirty bomb can be passed on, and it's a very major concern for the global community and everybody, because dirty bomb can also be operated by a lone wolf warrior as well.
Okay,
so this is one area. The next point is the strategic location of Pakistan. If you want to actually utilize, or if you want to launch any operation in Afghanistan or in FPAC region, which is going to be the largest conglomeration of the terrorists, you need a ground logistic support route. And that route, unfortunately, also passes through Pakistan. So therefore, there are many reasons why Western not media, I would say the Western states are giving a soft rope or a long rope to Pakistan.
Okay, so Christine Fair, this argument again, I'm not sure I entirely buy this. The fear of a dirty bomb falling into the wrong hands. I think again, for better or worse, that's Pakistani propaganda, which some folks in Washington seem to have bought into. Is that the only reason why they're not seeing the obvious, and that is that you can't have a guerrilla army run over a country with virtually no resistance, if not with some kind of support from a proper formal army, the army of a state?
All right, so it's a complicated answer because it has a lot of different moving parts, right? So one of the things that Pakistan has been really successful in doing, and I suspect your panelists will agree with me in some measure, is that they have used all of the things that the West fears about Pakistan to its advantage, right? So it has essentially cultivated this image that it's too dangerous to fail. And this, for example, motivates why the United States, but also Britain, routinely mobilize to ensure that Pakistan is not designated on the blacklist in FATF designations. A blacklist FATF designation would cut Pakistan off from the IMF. So to put it formally, what Pakistan is engaging in is nuclear coercion. Now, I have written many pieces over the years that it's time to call Pakistan's bluff, in part for the reason that one of your guests, and I can't see them with this Zoom setup, already articulated. Pakistan's nuclear weapons are its most important assets. The only way it can wage a credible threat against India is by having an ironclad command and control over them, right? So if Pakistan's weapons can be so easily pilfered or what have you, then the credibility of Pakistan's claims are diminished. So Pakistan has a very strong interest in keeping those nuclear weapons and assets as secure as possible. While at the same time stoking Western fears that it's the largest or the fastest nuclear proliferator. So the irony is that through this nuclear coercion, Pakistan is able to get the United States, Britain, and anyone else who's writing checks to the rogue state to essentially pay Pakistan, which it then uses to invest in the very same assets that it uses to blackmail us.
All right.
So
I am completely out of time. I apologize for the interruption, but I'm completely out of time. Thank you very much, though, to all our guests, Christine Fair, Tuhin Sinha, Major Lastana, Praveen Swami, and of course Mona Alam for joining us. Like I said, it is the worst kept secret in town. Somehow, whether it is the nuclear fear, whether it is the dirty bomb falling in the hands of a terrorist, or whether it is simply it is too dangerous to fail, as Christine Fair put it. For some reason, Washington and other global capitals are giving too much of a long rope to Pakistan. Hopefully, they will see through this at some point sooner than later. That's a wrap. I'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time. Good night.